As Pride Month kicks off across the country, several big companies are reconsidering their sponsorships of LGBTQ plus events. According to the Associated Press, San Francisco Pride and Kansas City, Missouri Pride are both facing $200,000 budget gaps due to major corporate donors dropping out. In Kansas City, that represents half of its annual budget. In St. Louis, Missouri, Pride organizers are down $150,000 after Budweiser, Brewer, Anheuser-Busch ended its sponsorship. Here in the Big Apple, the umbrella organization behind New York City Pride is facing a massive $750,000 budget gap after multiple companies withdrew their support. A recent Forbes report takes a look at the impact of companies rolling back diversity, equity, and inclusion policies and their support for Pride Month events. Let's bring in the author of that Forbes piece, Maria Gracia Santillana Linares. Maria, thank you for joining us. So what are some of the big companies who have rolled back corporate support for these LGBTQ events?
You mentioned some of them, Tom. So Anheuser-Busch is one of them. Nissan, Lowe's, MasterCard, Citi, PepsiCo. Target is another one. So a lot of these companies actually announced that they were going to be pulling back from corporate sponsorships of any and all DEI events. So Pride, really being kind of the staple for the month of June now. And so some, companies saw this coming. They announced again they were going to pull back. But it's across the board, large companies across industries, largely public companies too. Yeah,
reading some of those numbers off, those gaps are really eye-opening just to see how much support is being withdrawn. What are some of the reasons behind these sponsors dropping out?
Yeah, it's a lot of, I think, macroeconomic uncertainty, right? We're at a different economic times than we were last year. And so companies are really trying to face the risk. One of them is, of course, the impact of the Trump administration and their overall stance on DEI. I group Pride under that, right? President Trump himself has kind of called them, right, they're dangerous, demeaning, and immoral, programs. And so that is one end. Companies don't want to face regulatory pressure, investigation, cuts in funding. Right? We've seen the number of executive orders President Trump has signed that have said, if you have these practices in place, whether it be in your hiring, whether it be in internal resource groups, we're going to cut back on either research funding or federal government contracts. Companies are really trying to balance all their kind of external problems that they may face.
And, just once again, looking at some of these figures, how can organizers respond to fill those budget gaps? They must be panicking.
Yeah, they are. And they're turning to a few different types of kind of solutions to fill the gaps. And so we're seeing organizers really look at smaller corporations, local companies. And so in New York City, we're seeing breweries, we're seeing candle-making companies. I pull the example of Toronto, our neighbors in the north are looking at Canadian companies that have headquarters in Toronto to fill the gap that these American companies are filling. The big one is individual contributions. And so you mentioned kind of these efforts. New York City, $750,000 shortfall. They're currently running a $25,000 fundraising campaign. They're about 10% filled that gap, but really looking at individual contributors to kind of pitch in.
Now, so every Pride, one of the conversations in the LGBTQ community is about rainbow washing, right? And how some of these corporations are capitalizing on supporting the queer community just to make a buck. So do all members of the community see this as a bad thing?
Not really. I think the best example about this is over what happened in Twin Cities Pride in Minneapolis, right? And so they actually denied and ended their partnership with Target, a big company that's been rolling back massively on everything that's DEI. And they said, this is going to leave a $50,000 gap in our budget. Can you, the community, help fill it? Community responded. Not only did they meet that $50,000 goal in 24 hours, they're now more than double it. They've raised about $108,000. And so you're really seeing kind of the support of saying, like, you know what? We don't want your corporate money. We are going to kind of filling the gap.
Maria Gracia Santillana Linares, thank you for your reporting. Thank you for coming on the show.
Thank
we
you for
appreciate
having
your
me.
time.